In 1962, a veteran coming home from service kept one thing in his medicine cabinet above everything else. It was not expensive. It was not complicated. It was a small brown bottle that cost 30 cents and sat on a wooden shelf above the sink. That bottle handled what most Americans today buy 15 different products to handle. And somewhere between 1962 and right now, somebody decided you should forget it existed. Tonight, I am going to walk you through 25 things a bottle does that the cleaning industry spent 40 years trying to erase from American memory. And I am going to save the most important one for the end, because once you hear it, you will never look at a grocery receipt the same way again. But first, I need to tell you something about the men who never forgot. Veterans do not collect products. They are not trained to. The military trains men to solve problems with whatever is available, using the fewest possible resources under the highest possible pressure. That is not a philosophy. That is a survival requirement, and for generations of American servicemen. From the field hospitals of World War II to the barracks of Korea and Vietnam, hydrogen peroxide was always available, always worked, and always cost almost nothing. They brought that knowledge home with them, and while the rest of America was watching television commercials for color-coded specialty sprays and scientifically formulated bathroom solutions, veterans were still using the brown bottle because they had been trained to use what worked and ignore everything else. Here is what nobody tells you about what is in that bottle right now. The brown bottle in your medicine cabinet is 3% hydrogen peroxide. That is the same concentration your great-grandfather used in the 1940s, when wartime rationing meant one bottle had to stretch across an entire household. It is also the same compound your own immune system produces inside your white blood cells every single day to fight infection. Every time you catch a cold, every time bacteria tries to take hold inside your body, your white blood cells release hydrogen peroxide as a weapon. Think about that for a moment. Your body manufactures this compound automatically as part of its core defense system, and the pharmaceutical industry spent decades convincing you it was too primitive, too dangerous, too old-fashioned to use outside the medicine cabinet. When hydrogen peroxide contacts bacteria or damaged tissue, it releases oxygen. That fizzing you see is not a mystery. That is oxygen being released at a molecular level, lifting debris and destroying bacterial cell walls through pure oxidation. And when it finishes the job, it breaks down into nothing but water and oxygen. No chemical residue, no toxin, no mystery ingredient sitting on your kitchen counter next to your food. Just water and oxygen. That is the entire safety argument in 2 sentences. And veterans understood it intuitively because they were taught to understand what their supplies actually did, not just how to follow the label. Now let us go through every single use, starting with the ones field, medics, and military personnel relied on most. The first is wound cleaning on initial injury. A fresh scrape, a shallow cut, a dirty abrasion from a tool, or a fall. Pour a small amount directly onto the wound, let it fizz for 30 seconds, and rinse with clean water. The oxygen physically lifts debris, dead cells, and surface bacteria out of the wound. Military field medics used this as their first-line wound cleaner for decades. And modern research confirms that a single brief application on an initial fresh wound remains one of the most effective surface cleaning methods available. The key is using it only once on the initial cleaning and never on deep wounds or healing tissue. Veterans knew exactly when to stop. That discipline is what made it work. The second is earwax removal. Tilt your head. Drop 3 to 5 drops of 3% hydrogen peroxide into the ear canal and let it sit for 60 seconds. The fizzing breaks up compacted wax and allows it to drain naturally when you tilt back. Ear doctors today sell branded eardrops using this exact same chemistry. The active ingredient in most of them is hydrogen peroxide. Veterans used the brown bottle directly for 60 years before anyone thought to put it in a smaller bottle with a different label and charge 4 times the price. The third is foot soak for fungus and odor. Fill a basin with warm water, add 3 tablespoons of 3% peroxide per gallon, and soak for 20 to 30 minutes twice a week. Fungal organisms are anaerobic, meaning they cannot survive in an oxygen-rich environment. The peroxide creates exactly that environment around the nail bed and between the toes. Barracks conditions during extended deployments made foot fungus a persistent problem for servicemen, and this soak was a standard field hygiene solution long before commercial antifungal sprays existed. The fourth is diluted mouthwash for gum health. Mix 1 part hydrogen peroxide with 2 parts water and swish for 60 seconds before spitting. Never swallow it. The oxidizing action kills the anaerobic bacteria responsible for gingivitis, gum inflammation, and persistent bad breath at the source. Dentists today recommend diluted peroxide rinses specifically for gum disease. The American Dental Association spent decades dismissing this in favor of branded mouthwash products. And then the science quietly confirmed what veterans already knew. The fifth is toothbrush disinfection. Soak the bristles in undiluted 3% peroxide for 5 minutes once a week. This kills the bacteria that accumulate on toothbrush bristles between uses, including strains that can cause oral infections. Simple, free, and requiring nothing you do not already own. The sixth is a natural whitening paste for teeth. Mix a small amount of baking soda with 3 to 4 drops of hydrogen peroxide into a paste. Brush gently for 2 minutes, then rinse thoroughly. Do this no more than twice per week. Hydrogen peroxide is the active ingredient in virtually every commercial whitening strip sold in America today. Veterans were making this paste in barracks bathrooms. Decades before the whitening industry packaged the same chemistry into a plastic strip and charged $20 for it. The seventh is boot and shoe deodorizing. Spray the inside of boots with 3% peroxide and allow them to dry completely in the sun. The peroxide kills the bacteria living inside footwear that cause persistent odor, and the sun exposure provides a secondary disinfection layer through UV radiation. This was standard field hygiene for servicemen who could not rotate footwear regularly during extended operations. The eighth is uniform and fabric stain removal for blood and protein stains. Pour undiluted 3% peroxide directly onto the stain immediately. Let it fizz and work for 5 minutes, then rinse with cold water before laundering normally. The oxidation breaks apart the protein compounds in blood that bind to fabric fibers and cause permanent staining. This works better on fresh blood stains than any commercial stain remover currently on the market, and it costs a fraction of a cent per application. The ninth is armpit stain removal on white fabric. Mix 2 parts hydrogen peroxide with 1 part dish soap. Apply to yellowed armpit stains. Let it sit for 1 hour, then launder as normal. The peroxide oxidizes the protein compounds in sweat that bind to fabric and cause yellowing over time. Dry cleaning services and laundry product companies spent decades telling Americans that yellowed shirts required professional treatment or specialized products. $1 of hydrogen peroxide and dish soap does the job better. The 10th is laundry whitening as a bleach alternative. Add 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide directly to the washing machine drum along with your regular detergent on a hot water cycle. It brightens whites and lifts color without destroying fabric fibers, the way chlorine bleach does over repeated washings. It does not react with iron in old pipes and does not cause the yellowing that bleach produces on synthetic fibers. Modern textile scientists confirm that hydrogen peroxide is a gentler and more effective oxidizing whitener than chlorine-based alternatives for home laundry. The 11th is musty smell removal from towels and stored fabric. Soak the affected fabric in a bucket of hot water with 1 full cup of 3% peroxide for 30 minutes before laundering normally. Standard detergent washes surface soil away. It does not kill the mold, spore colonies embedded deep in textile fibers that cause persistent musty odor to return wash after wash. Hydrogen peroxide does. The 12th is metal and tool cleaning for rust, staining, and surface contamination. Soak a cloth in 3% peroxide and wipe down metal surfaces, tool handles, and equipment. The oxidizing action lifts surface contamination and kills bacteria on tool surfaces without the corrosive damage that bleach-based cleaners cause on metal. Veterans maintaining field equipment understood that the wrong cleaner destroyed the gear it was supposed to protect. Peroxide cleaned without damage. The 13th is mess kit and food container sanitation. Rinse food containers and eating surfaces with 3% peroxide. Let sit for 5 minutes and rinse with clean water. No chemical residue remains after rinsing because the peroxide has already broken down into water and oxygen. This made it the field sanitation solution of choice when clean running water was limited and contaminated food surfaces were a genuine health threat. Now, here's where the story stops being about cleaning and starts being about something much larger. The hacks that made the cleaning and food industry the most uncomfortable are not in the bathroom or the laundry room. They are in the kitchen, the refrigerator, and the garden. And they represent hundreds of dollars per year that veterans never spent because they never needed to. The 14th is kitchen counter disinfection. Spray 3% peroxide across the surface. Let it sit for a full 5 minutes without wiping. Then wipe clean with a cloth. Contact time is a variable that determines effectiveness. Food safety laboratory studies confirm that 5 full minutes of contact time gives hydrogen peroxide a disinfection rate comparable to commercial kitchen sprays at a cost of fractions of a cent per application. The 15th is cutting board sanitization. Pour undiluted 3% peroxide directly onto wooden or plastic cutting boards after contact with raw meat or produce. Let it bubble for 5 minutes, wipe clean, and rinse with warm water. Modern food science studies confirm that this method is not only effective against salmonella and E. coli, but gentler on wooden boards than the harsh chlorine-based sanitizers the food safety industry pushed as the only legitimate alternative. The 16th is refrigerator cleaning. Spray the inside walls, shelves, and door compartments with 3% peroxide. Let it sit for 5 minutes, then wipe dry. The peroxide kills mold, spores, bacteria, and yeast that cause food to spoil faster in storage. Because it breaks down into water and oxygen, it leaves zero chemical residue that could transfer to food, making it significantly safer than commercial refrigerator sprays that leave perfume and chemical compounds on surfaces, directly adjacent to everything you eat. The 17th is rubber gasket cleaning on older refrigerators and appliances. Soak a cloth in 3% peroxide, wrap it around the gasket, and leave it for 15 minutes. Bleach dries out rubber and cracks gaskets over time, increasing energy loss and eventually requiring replacement. Peroxide kills the bacteria and mold growing in the gasket folds without damaging the rubber itself. In a house built before 1980 with original appliances, this single technique can extend the life of a refrigerator gasket by years. The 18th is produce washing to remove pesticide residue and surface bacteria. Fill a clean basin with cold water and add 1/4 cup of 3% peroxide per gallon of water. Submerge fruits and vegetables for 5 to 10 minutes, then drain and rinse thoroughly with plain water. Agricultural University research confirms that a diluted hydrogen peroxide soak removes significantly more pesticide residue in surface bacteria from produce than plain water rinsing alone. The 19th is bathroom grout cleaning and mold removal. Mix 3% peroxide with baking soda into a thick paste. Apply it to grout lines with an old toothbrush. Let it sit for 15 minutes, scrub, and rinse with warm water. The peroxide lifts the staining molecules while the mild abrasive quality of the baking soda scrubs them away simultaneously. Modern cleaning researchers describe this combination as one of the most effective grout restoration systems available, outperforming most commercial grout products in independent testing. The 20th is toilet bowl sanitation. Pour half a cup of 3% peroxide into the bowl. Let it sit for 30 minutes without flushing, then scrub and flush. The oxidation kills bacteria and lifts staining without releasing chlorine gas into an enclosed bathroom space or leaving harsh chemical residue in the water supply. The 21st is seed germination treatment before planting. Soak garden seeds overnight in a solution of 1 teaspoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide per cup of water before planting. Horticultural science confirms that this soak softens the seed coat, kills surface, mold, and pathogens, and increases oxygen availability around the seed embryo. The result is significantly faster and more uniform germination rates, often 2 to 3 days ahead of untreated seeds, at higher success rates of 20 to 30% above baseline. Veterans who maintained kitchen gardens at home and on post understood that germination rate was a supply variable, not an aesthetic one. The 22nd is plant fungus and mildew treatment. Mix 1 tablespoon of 3% peroxide per cup of water in a spray bottle. Apply directly to plant leaves, showing powdery mildew or fungal spots in the early morning before direct sun exposure. The oxidizing effect breaks down the fungal cell structure, while the solution itself degrades quickly into water and oxygen, leaving no toxic residue on edible plants or in soil. Organic gardeners and horticultural researchers consider this one of the most effective and sustainable garden fungus treatments available. The 23rd is root rot rescue for overwatered plants. Water stressed or root rotting potted plants with a solution of 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide per cup of water. Root rot is caused by anaerobic fungi and bacteria that thrive in waterlogged, low-oxygen soil. The peroxide releases oxygen directly into the root zone, killing the anaerobic pathogens and simultaneously providing the roots with an oxygen-rich recovery environment. Plant enthusiasts and horticulturalists call this one of the most reliable rescue treatments for overwatered plants that most gardeners have never heard of. The 24th is mold removal from walls and surfaces in older homes. Spray undiluted 3% peroxide directly onto moldy surfaces. Let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes without rinsing. Then scrub and wipe clean. The peroxide penetrates the mold structure, oxidizes the root system called hygiene, and kills the mold at a cellular level rather than bleaching only the surface appearance while leaving the roots intact. Because it leaves no toxic residue, it is significantly safer in enclosed spaces like bathrooms where children and elderly people spend extended time. And now, the 25th hack. The one I held back from the beginning. The one documented in a 1965 United States Department of Agriculture bulletin that was printed once, distributed quietly through county extension offices, and never reprinted after the first run. Veterans who maintained household supply discipline, the men who thought about food the way a logistics officer thinks about field rations, had been doing this for decades before anyone wrote it down officially. Here is exactly what it is. Fill a large, clean basin with cold water. Add 1/4 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide for every gallon of water in the basin. Submerge your freshly purchased or harvested vegetables for 5 to 10 minutes. Drain on clean cloths and store normally. That is the entire process. No special equipment. No refrigeration required. No vacuum sealing. Just a basin, cold water, and a splash from the brown bottle. The 1965 bulletin documented the results in plain language. Strawberries that normally grew mold within 4 days lasted 12. Lettuce that wilted in a week stayed crisp for 3 weeks. Tomatoes held their firmness for nearly a month. The mechanism is now fully understood by food scientists. The peroxide kills the surface mold, spores, and bacteria that cause produce to decay from the outside in. Without those surface organisms, the vegetable decays only at its own internal biological pace, which is dramatically slower. The produce wash industry today sells $8 specialty sprays with nearly identical chemistry and celebrity endorsements on the label. The brown bottle predated every one of them by 60 years and outperforms most of them in independent testing. The average American household throws away between $30 and $50 of produce per month to spoilage. This technique eliminates most of that loss for a cost of pennies per week. Veterans who managed supply on limited budgets at home understood that waste was not a lifestyle inconvenience. It was a mission failure. This is what they knew, that the cleaning and food industries spent 40 years burying under specialty product marketing. Not because the information was dangerous, not because it was wrong. Because nobody can patent a technique that uses a 30-cent bottle and a basin of cold water. Nobody gets rich selling you something that simple. So the industry built 15 products to replace one bottle, convinced America those 15 products were necessary, and collected the difference for 4 decades. Veterans never bought the story. They kept the brown bottle. And now, because you watched to the end, so do you. Before you close this video, I want to ask you one specific question, and I want you to answer it in the comments. Before tonight, how many of these 25 uses did you already know? Give me a number. Not a sentence, not a paragraph, just a number. I read every comment, and I want to know how much of this knowledge your generation still carries. If this gave you something real, subscribe to this channel. Not to support a channel on the internet, to join a growing group of Americans who are done paying $40 a week for products that one brown bottle used to replace. Next week, I am going to show you something I found in a 1958 military field supply document from a logistics depot in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It describes a food storage technique that was standard practice for military households during the early Cold War period. It requires no electricity, no refrigeration, and no specialized equipment. And it extends the shelf life of dry staple foods by a factor of 3 compared to standard pantry storage. The document was declassified in 1979 and has been sitting in a public archive ever since. Almost nobody outside of veteran households has ever read it. I found it, and next week, I am going to walk you through it, line by line. Until then, go find your brown bottle. It is already in your cabinet. It has been waiting there the whole time.